Hello, I'm Tari. Welcome to my channel. Today I'll be showing you how to make fringe earrings. For our foundation, we're going to use a ladder stitch and then build on top of it using the brick stitch all the way to the top, and lastly do the tassels. I'm going to put materials for this tutorial in the description box. So let's start. Firstly, I'm going to pick 4 beads. Pull them down, but not to all the way to the end. I'm going to leave a tail to use later on. So on the 4 beads that I've picked, I'm going to put my needle from, the thread came out through this end. The needle came out through this end, so it has to go in through the opposite side like that, but just through 2 beads. And if you do that, this is what you should have. Now I'm going to put my needle through this bead, the one next to this one where the thread came out through. I'm going to put my needle through this bead and it's going to come out through here. Like that. Right? And I pull my thread. So now I'm just going to hold these 2 beads in place with my index finger and my thumb. I don't want them to move. I don't want the thread in between there to get loose as I work with this. So now I've picked 2 beads and I'm going to put my needle through the top like that. Like that there. Now my thread is in the middle. So now that it's in the middle, to continue, it has to be on one of these beads that is on the outside, not the middle. So I'm going to put my needle through this bead at the bottom right next to where this thread is and let my needle come out through this one at the top like that. I hold the beads with my index and thumb to keep them in place. I pull my thread and there. So now it's time to pick 2 beads again. I'm going to put my needle through this bead from the bottom. My thread came out through the top, so my needle has to go in through the bottom like that. And guess what? My thread is on the middle bead again. It has to be on the outside. So I'm going to put my needle through this bead and it'll come out through this bead. Like that. So for this first step, that is how it's done. I need 15 steps for my ladder. So I'm going to keep picking 2 beads at a time and I'll add them on to the ladder and I'll keep going until I have 11. Actually, I need 11 steps. Yes, just 11 steps. So yeah, I'm going to do that until I have 11 steps of my ladder. So now I have 11 steps on my ladder. It is time to work going upwards. So I'm going to pick 2 beads and before I start adding them on, let me just explain something. What we are going to be using are these lines in between the beads. I don't think that is clear. Right. You see those lines? The thread in between the beads? That is where the needle is going to be going through. So we have you see those threads in between the beads? That is where the needle will be going through. So I've picked 2 beads. I'm going to leave the first line in between the first 2 beads and use the second one. So it's 1 and 2. The needle goes underneath that thread like that. You see where my needle is? That's where it goes through. So to achieve the triangle effect as we're working upwards, you have to start from the second one, not the first one, the second one. You pick 2 beads and you put your needle through that thread in between the first 2 beads. You pull your thread slowly, and somehow automatically the beads will sit on top of each other. So at this point, your thread would have come through this bead, right? It has to go through this one and come back up like that, right? Pull the needle, pull my thread, make sure it's tight, and now the needle goes in through this bead next door, this one. The thread came out through here. Now the needle goes in through this one, and as it goes in through the next bead, the needle also has to go under the thread that is in between the second and the third bead, like that. Let me bring it close so you can see. You see what's happening here? The needle went in through the bead and then under the thread, then out. I pull my thread, and now the thread has to come out through the first bead that you've just added, like that. See that? Out through that bead. Yeah, like that. Oh no, it was actually supposed to be through this bead, so I'm just going to fix that. Put my needle back through that bead and through this one, just this one, the second one. Sorry about that, my sincere apologies. So yeah, that's how it should be the second time. So the first time the needle goes through this one. When it goes back in through the 2 beads, it has to come out through the one that is on the inside, not the outside, like that. So now at this point, I'm going to pick 1 bead. I'm going to put my needle in between the thread, that thread in between the beads. See that? Out it goes, and now the needle has to come back up through this bead like that. And I pull the thread so that they sit neatly. So now I need to pick another bead, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put my needle under this thread. I pull my thread, make sure it's tight, and I'm going to bring my needle through this bead from the bottom going up. See that? Yeah, so that's it. I'm going to pick another bead and repeat the process. Also, remember to pull your thread tight and just keep a firm grip on this part, on the beads as you're working on this part. Just hold it tight so that the threads do not become loose. There. So I'm going to keep doing that until I get to the end. So I've reached the very last one. I've done the last one. Now I'm just going to turn the beads. I find it easier to work from right going left. So just like the previous time, I'm going to pick 2 beads. I'm going to skip this thread in between the first 2 beads and go to the second one. The thread that is just between the second and the third bead. Like that. Not very clear, but yeah, that's better. Right. So pull my needle, my thread out. Now I'm going to take my thread and put it through the first bead from the bottom going up. I pull my thread, put the needle through the second bead, and under that thread sitting in between the second and the third bead, I pull my thread, I bring out my needle from the bottom going upwards, and there. I hope that is clear. So yeah, I'm just going to keep repeating this process until I'm at the very top. So yeah, remember now you have to pick 1 bead only, 1 bead at a time. You only pick 2 beads at the beginning of the line, and after that you go back to picking 1 bead only. So yeah, I've picked my 1 bead and I'm just going to continue. So this is where I am now. When you have 3 beads at the top here, right, you pick 6 beads like what I've done, and then you add them on the same way you've been doing at the beginning of every line, but this time you're using 6 beads. It's the very same thing. Then the needle goes through the first set of beads, right, and then through the other 3 beads, and under the thread that is in between the beads. And now the needle has to come back through this bead, so it's just putting the needle from the bottom like that. See that? And up it comes. Right, so now I'm just going to put my thread in through these beads. The first set of beads, and then through the other beads, the other 3 beads. Because that is where our hook is going to sit, so it just needs to be a bit secure. Right, so now I'm going to put my needle through these beads until it comes out through this one, and then we can start adding the tassels. So you can just do what you can at a time. If you want to do 3 beads at a time, it's fine. Now I'm just going to put my needle through the last beads. See that? Right, so it's time to start adding the tassels, and I'm going to start off by picking 10 beads. I have picked 10 beads. I'm going to make them go all the way down. Then I'm going to pick 3 beads. And now I'm going to put my needle through the 10th bead, right? I picked 3 other beads, and then now the needle goes through the 10th bead and the rest of those beads until I am out through the very first one. I pull my thread, and at the bottom here I'm going to have a cute little thing, a little flower. And now I'm going to put my needle through those 2 beads, you know, when we were doing the steps or the ladder stitch. So now I'm just going to put my needle through those 2 beads from our foundation. I pull my thread, not too tight, just tight enough. And then now I'm going to put my needle through the bead next door. See that? Pull my thread. There. So it's gotta be like this. This is what you should have. So now it's time to pick more beads. I'm going to pick 12 beads. I'm going to just add 2. I started off with 10. Now I'm going to pick 12, and I'm going to repeat the process. I've picked 12 beads, and now I need 3 more for the little flower, little star, whatever you want to call it, the cute thingy. Now I'm going to put my needle through these 12 beads. Make sure everything is sitting neatly, and then through those 2 beads at the top. And as you pull your thread, just make sure it's sitting neatly, right? Like that. So now my needle came out through this bead, now it's going to go in through the bead next door and come out through this one. So now I need to pick 14 beads. I'm going to keep adding 2 more beads from the previous tassel. So on the first one I picked 10, right? And then I picked 12. So now I'm going to pick 14, 16, 18. I'm going to keep adding 2, 2, 2 until I get to the 6th tassel. So now I have 6 tassels. I'm at the center. Remember when we were doing our ladder, I did 11 steps, right? So the 6th one is the one that is right at the center. So now I need to start reducing my beads. On my previous tassel, I picked 20 beads. So now I'm going to reduce that number by 2 and pick 18 beads. I'm going to pick 3 for the flower. And put my needle through those beads to form the tassel. And done. So I'm going to keep reducing the beads by 2 until I am on the very last tassel here, where I'm going to pick 10 beads. So I've done the last tassel and my thread has come out through this bead from the ladder stitch foundation that I made. So now I'm just going to remove my needle and I'm going to thread my tail. It should just be below the one at the top. But you know what? It doesn't matter. You might find your thread coming out through this side depending on where you'd have started doing your tassels. It doesn't matter. You can just use the same method that I'm about to show you to finish off. So now that I have threaded my tail, I'm going to put my needle through this bead right next to where the tail is, and through those 2 beads from the ladder stitch. Like that there. And now it is just next to that thread that I was using to make the tassels. So now I'm going to thread both threads on the needle, and I'm going to use all of them at the same time. So now that I have threaded both of the strings of the threads, I'm just going to put my needle through one bead, the one that is just above where the threads are. I'm going to put my needle through that bead. See that? I'm going to pull my threads gently, right? And now I'm going to make a knot in between this bead and this bead, this one and this one, where the thread is. Where the threads are, I'm going to make a knot by putting my needle just behind that thread, and I'm going to use the 2 loops from the 2 threads to make my knot. I pull slowly so that the threads go all the way to the bottom, and I pull tight. And there. So I'm going to do that again, but first I'm going to put my needle through 2 beads going up, and then I'm going to make a knot. Put my needle under the thread, pull it out, use the loop, pull slowly, and the knot goes all the way to the bottom. So I'm going to make one last knot, but first I'll go through 2 beads, then I'll make a knot. So I made my last knot and I am done. This is what I have. So now I can actually cut the thread way at the bottom, and now it's time to add a hook. I'm just going to open up this hook by pushing it sideways with the pliers and put it on the earrings right at the top there, in between those 2 beads. And now I'm going to close it by just pinching it and pushing it in the opposite direction, and then I'm going to give it a gentle pinch like that there, and I'm done. So at this point, all you have to do is make another one, and ta-da! There, cute earrings. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching my video. I'll see you next time. Bye.